to make this video considering the topic of Deepwoken's overworld.
Deepwoken's world is very large and beautifully crafted, but it falls under the niche of having a lot of space but not a lot of things to do in it. The usual gameplay loop I've personally been noticing now is that players will either void walk until level 14 then farm bosses the rest of the way, or they'll just immediately go to Hive and Songseeker until level 14 then farm bosses the rest of the way. This sort of repetitive gameplay loop really starts to take away from the rest of the islands on the Etrian and Eastern Luminant. Don't get me wrong, the other islands do have things like unlockable talents, small NPCs that you can do little quests for, and the compassion, bravery, and I can't remember what the other one's name is, but those 3 quests that you need to help you progress your build. But you'd really only need to go there 1 or 2 times, and then after that you usually never see those islands again. Anytime I go to one of those islands, I would never see a player ever go there at all, any point in their progression. And honestly, that's just sad. Really think about it. Miner's Landing, Summer Isle, you can set your spawn areas at these points and no one touches them at all whatsoever. Like, have you seen how large that volcano actually is? It takes you like 10-15 minutes just to clear the entire thing. I mean, half of Starswept is literally built amazingly and there's nothing in there. Nothing. Only like 2 red Sharko spawns. And a guaranteed owl spawn. There's just no incentive for players to go there in the first place. I figured the one reason would be to explore, but once you're done exploring and seeing how everything is, there's no purpose anymore. The boat drive is too far, and really people only take the teleporter from Etris to get to Hive once they want to enchant their weapon, and that's it. Even Hive is built well. There's nothing at Hive. The boat thing at the bottom of the docks talking about Lifeweave, he doesn't do anything. The quest with the guy in the mask, no one does that quest, and what do you get? A Stratus Stone? Like, get that out of here, bruh. And don't even get me started on these vendors that sell you weapons and armor that are poo-poo tier for 350 notes. Like, no one's gonna drop 10k on a gladiator helmet, bro. Most of the problems is for most of the quests that are around don't really give well enough of a reward to be, like, have players want to do them. So here's what I propose to be the next thing that they should add in the actual world. Now when I say dungeons, I don't mean the static areas of Crypt of the Unbroken, Duke, or Layer 2, or even that volcano for that matter. The problem with these dungeons is that although it's repeatable, and the loot drops they give are pretty good, they're lacking in variety and replayability. When you go through these dungeons, they're quite literally the same exact areas over and over again. You could say like the definition of insanity, if you will. But with these dungeons are going to have something else. RNG. Truly randomized dungeons. And here's how it'll work. When you get through Trial of 1, the first thing that you do is your character spawns in, and they go through a big door that shows the next room, right? And it's an instance server like Duke and Ferryman, yada yada. Now, for the areas that I listed before in my last segment, I was talking about how the areas of Starswept Valley, Summer Isle, Songseeker, and Meteor Isle don't have anything in them. And so to give players an incentive to actually go to those areas, add dungeons to those areas. These dungeons will be themed around the island that they're stated in. So if it's a Songseeker dungeon, it'll be foresty and have lots of Songseeker mages. If it's a Fort Merit dungeon, it'll be a prison swarmed with guards and prisoners that want to hurt you and beat you up. But the main part to not make these dungeons so stale is that these rooms would be randomly generated in tiles of 10, with a boss at the end for good measure. And on top of all of that, these dungeons will also be time locked, meaning in real life, let's say the weekend, or let's say it's wintertime or summertime, those would be the only times that these dungeons would actually open up. So all you'd have to do is grab your buddies, go to Starswept Valley, actually explore Starswept Valley, find where the dungeon door is, do the dungeon, and then there you go. The goal for these dungeons, first off, is not to make them so stale like the other dungeons we've had before, because everybody knows, as much as we love Layer 2, that dungeon wasn't really a dungeon. I sort of expected, like randomly generated rooms and whatnot, and a different experience every time I did it. I expected a dungeon, a roguelike dungeon, like this game is supposed to be, but it wasn't that. But if you have these types of dungeons, where it would be day-based or season-based, and you have an area, or a couple few areas in an area where no one goes to, where they can decide, oh hey, let's look for the dungeon door today, guys, and then you all can decide and go and fight and do the randomly generated dungeon. It would just breathe so much more life into these areas that otherwise don't have anyone going there at all whatsoever. And considering this game is supposed to be in the roguelike genre, aren't you supposed to have a different experience every time you go into a dungeon? I know they changed some of the spawns in Layer 2, like how where the Bonder spawn, but that doesn't count. I suggest taking some ideas from something like Warframe. The entire level system in Warframe is based off of tile sets. And then within these tile sets, you can add things like areas for battles, puzzles. You can decide and incorporate actual stealth back into the game, because right now stealth is completely useless. You can make an entire tile set just based off of, hey, don't get your ass caught. Wouldn't randomly generated areas literally fit with the idea of Deepwoken's world constantly shifting? I think these things alone would be enough to actually give players at least a reason to make their spawn at some of these islands in the first place. But that's all that I have right now. If you guys like this idea or want anything more to hear from it, I'm working on a couple of ideas for some of these dungeons already. I'm painting them. I'm not really good at painting, but you know, I'll make a video for each dungeon as I go along, if that's good.
I know you guys know the deal. The time is almost up for us low subbed YouTubers, so if you want to see more deep dive analogies like this, please go sub up. I'm going to post some more. I'm going to post about suggestions, so thank you.